Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our weekly call for community solutions hosted by the Forbes Funds. We are really excited to be joined this week by Robert Cherry, CEO at Partner for Work, which is the largest workforce development board in Southwest Pennsylvania. We've had a lot of workforce conversations or workforce focused conversations with Partner for Work internally and on these calls for community solutions in the past, even in the previous summit. But today's focus is a little bit different. We're going to be talking about entrepreneur operating systems before rolling into our public policy discussion towards the end of the call. And this is also going to be a bit of a dialogue between Rob and Fred Brown, because there are a lot of different considerations that Partner for Work has made in implementing this model. I've been hearing EOS used a little bit more as common terminology across different organizations. And so just hearing from a local nonprofit organization, especially with the size and magnitude that Partner for Work has, really just made sense as kind of an intro call this morning for folks. So as a very brief overview before I turn it over to Rob, Robert Cherry is a seasoned workforce development and public policy executive with extensive leadership experience. He served as the appointed Deputy Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, managing 6 bureaus and leading 2,500 employees. During his tenure, he initiated programs like the Vets Ready initiative and facilitated unemployment insurance funds. Prior to DWD, he made significant contributions at Employ Milwaukee, including developing the Career Plus program for young adult workforce training. He also has a background in public policy from his time at Community Advocates Public Policy Institute and the Center for Urban Population Health. In July of 21, Rob became the CEO at Partner for Work, overseeing Pittsburgh and Allegheny County's public workforce system. In this role, he focuses on driving workforce development activities through partnerships, innovation, and strategic solutions. Rob holds a Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and is an elected board trustee of the Village of Brown Deer, where he contributes to strategic policymaking. So I really appreciate you joining us today, Rob, especially given your busy schedule and all the different things that you're juggling currently. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you to give a little bit about yourself, Partner for Work, but most importantly, Entrepreneurial Operating Systems.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you, Fred and Debbie, also the whole Forbes Fund team for having me here today to talk about this. Because it's just something fairly new that we've gone through as an organization. I just love sharing about it because it's helped us out tremendously. So as Emily said, Partner for Work is the Workforce Development Board for the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And our role is to essentially help oversee and kind of manage the public workforce system here, including the career link system here. And so just happy to be here today and talk about this. So one of the main reasons starts off with a kind of an issue when you move to a different kind of corporate operating system. And what was difficult for us as an organization, I think we were going through some growth. Second, we were also initiating a hybrid schedule, meaning some folks are, we require folks to essentially come in 8 days a month. They pick their days, and that comes out to about 2 days a week for everyone. And so we're not in this environment anymore where I can walk down the hall and kind of check in with folks. It's a little bit looser than that. A hybrid environment creates a lot of meetings, but it's not as inclusive and creative, I think we all agree, as kind of being in the office every day. On the flip side of that, it offers tremendous job quality, opportunity, and flexibility to folks, and gives them an opportunity to truly work the way they need to work, if you can give them the opportunity to do that. But what the specific issue I was having is that we were growing in initiatives, we were growing in funding, we were growing in opportunities, but I didn't have, from my vantage point, I did not have a good understanding of who was responsible for what, as we were growing like this. And what I wanted to do was to create a way to systematize it in a way that, A, um, because I didn't know what everyone was doing at a specific time. I just figured that folks in the organization also did not know what I was doing at any particular time, and I thought it was important for them to know that. And so, what type of system could we engage in that, from top to bottom, everyone was on the same page, using the same process, and understood how, whether you're in IT or research, or programs, how each of our roles integrate up into one larger vision for the organization. That was really important to us, especially with kind of all the moving pieces that we had. And so we found EOS, and we looked at a few different ones, a few different operating systems. And I like this the most because of a specific thing in EOS, and they're called L10 meetings. And L10 meetings are designed this way. You have, you have your agenda for the meeting, and you move through the meeting in regards to every 90 days, each individual gets a set of what you call rocks. And your rock is what you have to do, have to complete within that 90 days. And we all know each other's rocks. We choose them ourselves. We make sure that they are aligned with, the work that needs to be completed. And we all hold each other accountable for getting that rock done. And we don't have specific meetings around the rocks, your particular rocks, unless you have to. But during that L10 meeting, if my particular rock was to develop 3 strategic relationships, during every meeting, we walk through the rocks, and you're recommended to get 1 to 7 rocks. And if I am on track with that rock, I say that rock is on track. And if that rock is not on track, I express that it's not on track, and it moves to an issue phase of the meeting. Each person in my executive team, we walk through that process with each other. After we go through the rocks, we actually go through the issues. And so if I drop down the rock and say a particular issue was that I'm not on track with that specific rock, we talk about it as a group. As we kind of talk about it, the particular issue that we have, and this is a very important part of EOS also, the group asks the person accountable for the rock, in the next 7 days, what will you do to get this rock on track? And I have to verbalize that. And in 7 days, when we have our next L10 meeting, I have to come with that accomplished. And so, when we started EOS with just our executive team. So we worked, we wanted to make sure that we all understood this. We did it for 4 months with just our executive team. We rolled it out to the entire organization in January. And so there's much more to EOS than this, but I'm telling you about the particular parts that helped us out a whole lot. And this is why it really helped. Projects don't get stuck because they're so overwhelming anymore. And that every 7 days, what you can do actually just moves the needle week by week on some of the things that you need to do, especially if a project gets stuck. And so what we find is that our goal is to get 80% of the rocks completed as an executive team. This last quarter, we were 76 point something. And so we missed our bar. We haven't been in this situation for a year yet, but we just missed it. But the progress that we made on each rock, we missed some rocks. We were 90% there, but we just didn't have it done. We finished it by the end of the week, but we did not finish it by that date. We just had to be honest with ourselves. But the amount of traction that we made all, across the board with just moving things and them not getting stuck, because we we haven't had, meetings about them and kind of talk them through. The amount of progress that we've been able to make has been significant. And so it's interesting because Friday, my rock was dependent on someone outside of the organization, and they just now got back to me. And so during one of the meetings, I had to chime in and say, I got this rock done now, and we all just kind of laugh about it. But what we're learning is a few different things as we go through this process. One, how to write your rock the smart way, how to not be in a situation where someone outside the organization is in a position to say if your rock gets done or not. And so and sometimes it's the difference even in, I'll have this completed or I'll have a framework for it. And so there's specific ways to kind of write these rocks in a way that, help you get them accomplished, but it doesn't put the onus of the rock on someone outside the organization. And this has really helped our organization so much from the standpoint now that, like I said, someone who's not on the executive team knows exactly what I'm working on over the next 90 days. I know what they're working on. We don't share L10 meeting notes or anything like that together as an organization, but it definitely has helped us be on the same page, especially when, there's not as many in an environment where there's not as many people in the office right now. And folks can understand what each other are doing and how that ties into the overall vision of the organization. And so it's, like I said, it's been tremendously helpful to us. I would recommend it. And there was some shifting that we had to do. This is mostly for for-profit organizations. It's not used with nonprofits as much. So our trainer who we had, he was learning during the process also. And one of the specific things that we really had to adjust in our model is that as a workforce board, we have chief elected officials. It can get political at times. And I pick my rocks, and I can't take any more rocks according to EOS. You're locked in those rocks, and you have to take those rocks. And we were very upfront with our trainer that if the mayor of the county exec or the governor calls, guess what? I got a new rock. I can't tell those folks that, I'm closed down for 90 days and I can't take that opportunity on. I have to accept that and just move. And we were apprehensive about, it being so rigid. But we were able to adopt a model for us that allowed us to have that flexibility to do that. And that has been really helpful for us. It hasn't, it hasn't created situations where we could not get other things done when we've had to pivot in a quarter. So so far so good. And I think me and Fred will have a dialogue about it and open up to any questions folks have about it. But thank you for having me here again.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Rob. And that was such a great summary. I was putting some notes in the chat around, EOS gives an organization common terminology, SMART goals adoption, but something specific to the nonprofit sector that I would love, for you and Fred both to speak to is about that sense of, support and alignment that employees need to feel in order to stay with an organization, because we see so much, transition and turnover, specifically within nonprofit organizations, and especially post-pandemic. And so how is EOS a solution to that as well, in addition to the framework for hybrid work? It seems very adaptable. So I'll open it up to you first, and then Fred, if there's anything that Rob's sharing that really resonates with you, please jump in.
Yeah, and there's a specific part as you're going through this process with EOS. there's a specific part where you really have to look at your organization and go through a process called right person, right seat. And in that process, you have to you essentially fire everyone in the organization, even myself. You fire everyone in the organization, and you go back through and say right person, right seat. And in right person, right seat, there's three questions that you ask about that particular person in that particular role. Do they get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? And you have to just be very honest about that. And we had some that we said no to. And it didn't mean that that person didn't have a job. It meant if we said no, was there particular support that we could give that person through training? Is there another role that they're interested in? Or do we see their skill set benefiting the organization in a different way? We had to have those honest conversations and then have that honest conversation with those folks. And I would say that no one in this process was let go from the organization, but there were three people whose roles shifted because of this. They're a lot happier now. And so, we were able to have those conversations with folks and put them in a position where they could be successful.
That's amazing. And I saw Alyssa. I hope that I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Elizabeth. That is a huge point. Get it, want it, capacity to do it. Yes. Very great questions. And Fred, I know that in our internal conversations, you last year had kind of had our staff do a brief intro to this by reading the book Traction, just to make sure we knew what was coming. So from what Rob has shared, what are some things that are really resonating for you as the leader of the Forbes Funds, thinking about how this works for us internally, but also as a capacity builder for the region? What are some considerations that other organizations should be thinking about as well?
I think the three critical things we have to acknowledge is some foundations are adopting EOS already. So those organizations who don't even know what this is run the risk of not being able to apply for grant opportunities given that. The second one is we still have shocks and stressors coming to our ecosystem, and organizations that are unable to pivot, move quickly, and be agile really run the risk of not being around. As a result of COVID, things are moving at a much quicker pace. And as Rob mentioned, like even as a CEO, tackling people working from home has been a big shift for me. As I'm an older guy in the game, so I'm used to people being in the office, walking down the hall. But once COVID hit, it changed how you measure. To Rob's point earlier, you can't walk down the hall and talk to somebody every day. You got to find another way of tracking stuff that is happening in the organization. The third one is, I think EOS also allows you to really define, are you really good at something that you have tackled? Because the metrics that come out of it give you a real sense of the competitive edge or the lack thereof that you have as you look at specific deliverables that your organization provides. If you look at timeline, deliverables, and impact, it gives you a real sense like we've been grinding away at something, but when we look at the measurable outcome of it, is it worth the effort? Is this something we should be doing? Does somebody do this better than us? The fourth thing that I think is critically important, and Rob alluded to this in the construct of how you measure rocks, and I'm pretty sure he was referring to not having your rocks dependent upon external entities completing tasks that impact your rock, right?
Exactly.
That's one level of it. But when you think about the scalability of anything Rob does, I do, or anybody else, it requires partners. And so this notion of organizations wanting to be a part of an organization that's measuring 30, 60, 90-day increments, operating with rocks, looking at systems application, internal seat alignment, and capacity, get it, want it, have the ability to do it. Like when you look at all of that and you look at your partners, in many instances, partners are just dog pedaling. They're just holding on. And so how does EOS help them really solidify their role in the ecosystem that one might be leading or creating that really transforms the way that we work? And then the fifth thing is we have to look at working smarter and not harder. EOS to me allows you to do that. It allows you to really explore through partnerships and internal processes do we really have the bandwidth to do certain things? And then I think the most critical thing is, and this is a struggle we've had, how do you take really, really strong leaders that are used to running programs and have them manage projects to get to scale? And I think EOS provides the framework to give partners and internal processes rocks to get measured on the same timeline. So that's my response.
Thank you, Fred. And so, Rob, in terms of adoption and just kind of like being real with other nonprofit leaders on the call, right? What are some of the like unexpected either like bright spots or pain points that have come with adopting this process? I mean, I think it's a huge testament to how you all rolled this out and worked with a trainer to make sure you adopted a model that was flexible, for you, and having nobody that was let go from the organization, even if they switch roles. Like that seems crazy from somebody,
Yeah.
who's not familiar with the model. But what else has really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think it doesn't. It's hard in the beginning. It is. This is an organizational change. What's great about it is that everyone in your organization will be having a staff meeting the same way from top to bottom. What's really difficult in the beginning is to get people to say that they are off track about something and be honest about it. They know they have 90 days to do it. And it's an unusual way it was an unusual way for us to work. So the first quarter that we did this, this is us as an executive team. We noticed ourselves like really going hard after the rocks after, in that last 30 days, right? And so we really weren't like moving, you know, to the scale that we needed to do. We were ramping up our work in the last 30 days. We weren't being honest with ourselves that something was off track, because in a lot of instances, we weren't working on it until 30 days out. So we were saying on track, on track, on track. And what we should have done in that first quarter is to set a middle meeting and said, okay, now let's walk through these rocks and see where you're at, right? But instead, we had a lot of activity towards the end of the quarter, and then the problems started coming out, right? That's when the off track started happening. One thing I tried to do, and this is something that our trainer, specifically requested to me, is he said, you need to be the first one to say off track, right? If for everyone else to feel comfortable saying that something is off track, you need to say it first. And so I started doing that. It still didn't happen probably until the end of the second quarter, where folks really got comfortable saying something was off track. Second, discussing it amongst their peers. It really is something that it really is a culture change to discuss problems like that, in an organization. And, honestly, to be a little bit vulnerable about, can I get this done in 90 days or not, and talk to each other about that. The point where you really have to hold each other accountable is on those 7-day to-dos. Is if I say that I'm going to do something in the next 7 days, and I come back to the table amongst my peers, amongst my colleagues, and it is not done, you call them out and you tell them that is unacceptable, that they did not get the thing done that they were supposed to do in the next 7 days. And that group accountability has really changed our executive team. And also that vulnerability in talking through issues and being able to talk through issues has also, to me, brought us closer together, and has involved each of us in all of the things that we have to do. And so in these L10 meetings, I may have a specific workforce issue, but sometimes my CFO gives me some really good advice or thoughts around strategy. And this is a person I would not have gone to about this issue previously. So definitely it will be a sea change for your organization. And then you will skin your knees doing this, because it's hard in the beginning. But after a few quarters, you you will see the benefits of this. We're going through the departments kind of skinning their knees with it right now. And the good thing is that we started ahead of them. And so we're able to say, that's okay. Trust the process, keep going through this, and because we know it works.
Thank you so much, Rob. And as a shout out to the team that's very newly adopting this, I actually spoke to one of your team members at the Community Partner Day at Pitt earlier this year, and they spoke so highly as somebody who is so new to the process still. But I also think again, it's a really great practice to have the leadership team adopt things like this first, and then roll out to make sure you have the weight behind it or the teeth behind it. So. Last question, because I know you have to jump in just a minute, but a lot of times for nonprofit organizations, and I think Elizabeth's comment in the chat really alludes to this, is that a lot of times nonprofit organizations are encouraged to adopt a business mindset or an entrepreneurial mindset, and there's a lot of pushback, against that because nonprofits are almost like the businesses for good terminology, or organizations for impact, not for profit. So how is EOS different or more complementary to the work of nonprofit organizations versus something that, people might butt up heads against?
Yeah, and that's something that we talked about internally also, and we did get some pushback. I mean, this was not perfect, and one person, even because we do send out, surveys to folks, and they're anonymous. One person, acknowledged in a survey, and they said, well, why would we want to do this? We're a nonprofit. And, my response to that is nonprofit is more of just a tax designation. We're all businesses. We all have goals. We all want to raise revenue. We want to do very structural things with our organizations. This in some ways the same way that PNC does it. We want to see our organizations grow, and we all need to adopt policies and processes that make it easy for folks to understand where they are in that type of growth for that organization. And so this is a lot more about corporate organization than it is about where our morals are or anything like that. It really is a opportunity to align everyone working the same in your organization. And I think that whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit, that type of organization within your company is vital to kind of grow in it.
Thank you so much. And I saw, Marvin, your comment as well, that coming closer together by way of accountability, which is huge. Rob, is there anything else you'd like to share before you have to leave us this morning?
No, I just say, our experience with EOS has been really good. I mean, we're learning along the way, but as far as from an accountability perspective and an internal organization perspective, it has helped us tremendously. I used to call specific problems like treadmill problems. I would ask folks, is that a treadmill problem? A treadmill problem is where you see a lot of activity on a specific issue, but it's not going anywhere. And we have a lot less of those in the organization right now, because even if we don't get a rock completed, if we have moved the needle on something 70 to 80% during that time, that is tremendous progress across the board. And so when you use that multiplier effect across the top to the bottom of an organization, you have made your organization a lot more productive. And that's what it's done for us.
Thank you so much, Rob. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this morning, and I will be sharing the recording out on Friday of this week in our weekly newsletter. If anybody has, follow-up questions, who's the best person on your team to reach out to get some guidance, even if they're looking to, adopt the EOS model, talk to a trainer, could you share that contact information in the chat?
Sure, I will do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Switching gears to you, Fred. So the sense of accountability and collective impact, magnified within an organization. And you spoke about this a little bit earlier on the capacity building side, but one of the things that you often say is that no one organization can do this work on its own. And so collectively, as we're working within our organizations to improve accountability, which creates this support structure, as Rob is speaking, as we've been working through EOS adoption within our organization, what are some of those areas of traction or synergy, even in adopting this model, and how can we think about that at scale?
I think it's important for every organization to determine as soon as possible what do they think their value is to the region, the organization, and the sector. And in determining that, what is the language that resonates across the ecosystem that clearly articulates the value added that you might bring to the table? As many of you guys know, 6 years ago, we adopted the social determinants of health and the UN SDGs to really create a framework so that our conversations not only had applicability in the nonprofit sector, but also in the corporations, small businesses, and university settings, in particular with hospitals, because they're using that terminology. And in many ways, a lot of nonprofits have steered away from that. However, to create a response mechanism to your first question is, I believe that no single organization can solve today's problems by itself because they're complex. And yet we want simplicity to resolve complex issues. And so one of the ways to arrive at a level of simplicity is to find content experts who do things better than you, but share a metrics for how you hold each other accountable, what's the language you use, what does success look like. And EOS provides that framework. I would say for us, the most exciting thing about this work is that we are linking EOS to Skilly, our generative AI tool, as a combination to help smaller and emerging nonprofits be more competitive locally, regionally, nationally, and beyond, right? So as a result of COVID, the world has grown exponentially. And so I struggle with this notion that nonprofits feel like they can't generate revenue. Like it's difficult for me to understand that when in fact that philanthropy can go on a certain trajectory for 3 to 5 years and decide we're not doing that anymore. You've hired staff to work in the organization for 3 to 5 years, and the thing that was funded is no longer funded. What do? Like, if you don't build in infrastructure to offset the shifts at the larger level in philanthropy, then you run the risk of taking good and powerful staff members out of the equation. People need to understand there's a role that the church plays, there's a role that the nonprofit ecosystem plays, there's a role that philanthropy plays, there's a role government plays, there's a role universities plays, there's a role healthcare sectors play, there's a role businesses play. We keep tackling problems like we're the only one trying to fix the problem. If you don't have common language, you can't invite people into solving the problem if they don't understand. And in the nonprofit sector, we got a large alphabet. Every time you walk in a meeting, people are saying acronyms, and people who don't know this work are like, what are y'all talking about? And we're so used to saying it, we kind of turn people off from the most important thing. And so creating a universal language that has local, national, regional, global implication is critical. And so for us, the combination of social determinants of health, UN SDGs, EOS, and AI is critical when you think 98% of CEOs would adopt generative AI right now. The challenge is their teams are hesitant to adopt it. And so when you start looking at what's necessary for an organization to be competitive in the 21st century global economy, people are stuck on what they used to do in a time where we have to become more agile and iterative. And EOS creates that 30, 60, 90-day window to do that. And so I just feel a certain way that those people who suffer from paradigm paralysis in 6 months to a year might not be in business, or if they are, they're going to be struggling. Like, there's some things that are happening we can't control. Either we're going to figure out how to manage them in the best way possible to support our organizations, or some of us will put our head in the sand and say, this doesn't apply to me, and be passed over. That's a real reality. And some people are really believe that what they've been doing for 20 years is going to be relevant 10 years from now. And I just don't given the way things are moving, I'm not challenging the people. Their passion is not real. That's not the challenge. How you execute what you're passionate about is tangible. If you can't measure that, you can't show the impact of that, you can't get your team wrapped around that and show, if you partner with us, we grow this opportunity exponentially by doing X, Y, Z. Without a way to measure that, track that, and hold people accountable, you cannot do that. Therefore, no organization can scale up to solve social phenomena, which is what we're supposed to be doing.
You, Fred. And I think so I saw a lot of nodding from folks who are joining us on camera as you were speaking. And I know for a lot of these Monday calls, exactly what you said, right? Like we say things so often that sometimes it's not clear when something isn't resonating, or when we get stuck in that, capacity building language and we're not speaking to where nonprofits are. And so as we're moving to meet folks, where they are, building capacity, encouraging people to adopt this model that would encourage different types of development and different income streams for nonprofit organizations. There's also that level of vulnerability that Rob spoke to, and we've had that conversation around, mental health of employees. And I think a lot of times, especially in the nonprofit sector, you see folks taking things, on our shoulders, trying to solve things on our own. And so, how can EOS be a mechanism, not only for focusing, externally on, social impact sector outcomes, which, seems very like cold when you put everything down to outcomes, and talking about the work that we do. How can this also build up individuals, either through, recognition of gifts, skills, and talents, or or other ways of looking at their work?
I think that's a great question. I think my philosophy right now is that the nonprofit ecosystem has maintained a certain work ethic and trajectory that's based upon doing socially good things. Those socially good things can wear away people's ability to maintain the trajectory of an organization. If we don't begin to recognize both the strain that doing social good and social impact has on the organization, and giving space for our organizational leaders to take off and refuel themselves, then we're going to have mediocrity kind of growth where a meteor flies across the sky, everybody looks at it as bright and shiny, boom, and it crashes. And then another one comes and crashes. And so we'll never have sustained growth. We have, since COVID, attempted to really move to a 4-day work week, which has been, we got a lot of pushback from that internally, because we should be open, 5 days a week. Some of us work 7 days a week. And so people are not taking into account the intimate relationships that's required to build trust don't happen during every work week. They happen on weekends, in the evenings, in the mornings. And so being able to have a flexible schedule and also manage the organization's culture and tangible outcomes is tricky. And so even when you move to having these hybrid opportunities, giving people a flex schedule, teleworking, people are shopping, people are taking care of kids. They got a sick kid. Instead of them having 85% of their time focused on work, it moves to 50. And like, do you want to beat the person up for that? Or do you want to give them mercy and grace and say, hey, why don't you go ahead and take half a day, take care of your family? Because you're not even focused if you're sitting there watching your kid throwing up and being sick, right? And so what I think has happened is, as a result of COVID, at least for me, it's pruned my tree with regards to, I need to be more sensitive to the humanity level of our work. And in doing so, how do I recognize the needs of my team? We work hard, but I hope we work smart and not just hard. And our greatest struggle to me still is, how do you hold accountable partners who are instrumental in doing our work? And then when that falls short, nobody on my team wants to be held accountable for the partner falling short or blame the partner. They still are holding a rock. So they have to do double work to get it done, which is a problem. It's just a problem at the end of the day, because you don't know as the leader that your team is doing double work until you see the impact and they tell you, well, that person never delivered the thing. And then you as a CEO got to go back and like, what happened? Why ain't nobody did? We cut checks. Why did we do? Like all of these things in my mind start to go off as warning bells and red flags. And so we attempted I would say 18 months ago, to adopt a philosophy around an ecosystem that we have, and people being at the micro, meso, macro, and global level of the ecosystem based upon Covey's work on the speed of trust. So there's 4 characteristics that we look for: integrity, intent, capabilities, and results. For me, there's a lot of people that say a lot of stuff about what they could do. Show me. Just show me, give me the tangible data and evidence, and then we can move forward. I'm really not interested in hearing a bunch of great things that are not backed up by data, right? Because at that point, we can have a cogent conversation. Otherwise, we're just having, just a nice general conversation, which is fine. But if I want to get something done, I need to be able to trust my partner's ability to do their end. And if they don't, we need to have a shared responsibility of what does accountability look like? How can we have courageous conversations and people not be upset about being confronted about not delivering? That's a problem in the nonprofit ecosystem to me. People like keep having projects with people who don't deliver, and then they get mad at the organization but never confront them, and the organization becomes codependent in a way of these other institutions and never break through to being self-actualized, if that's a construct for organizations' evolution. And we can't grow as a body in Southwestern PA if I can't point to partners and say, I trust this partner implicitly, they deliver. All I could do, if it's just me and my team, we got a small influence. But if I have 10 partners with the same influence that I have, that grows tenfold plus. And so how do you do that? It's difficult. There's people that don't like me because I say, hey, we can't do work with you anymore. And they get offended. I'm like, well, you didn't deliver. And so we have to have more courageous conversation, and it hurts because you like people. This is not about not liking people, but it's about, am I committed to doing this thing, and what's my commitment to get it done?
Thank
Terry,
you,
I see
Fred.
your hand up.
You are on mute, Terry.
It's only been 1,000 years we've been doing this. My question is, as you're talking about follow through, accountability, just it is thinking about getting buy-in from your team at the beginning, for me, is magic. Like, I'm curious about starting even there.
Well, I could say, you heard Emily say, every year my team gets 3 to 4 books to read before we implement something. So we don't just say we're going to do something. I first want them to cognitively allow the idea to bounce around in their head, because there's nothing we can read that's going to have the same applicability in the landscape we're in. So it's almost that every time we read something, we're extrapolating or distilling from what we read the applicability of that thing to our thing, which makes it uniquely different than anything else. So there's never a read the book, we do exactly the thing. But if you give people enough constellations to look at, they can begin to reimagine their work from a different vantage point. And what I hope happens is people begin to dream and aspire to do more with what they have as a concept. Then now, if you apply it to a partner or set of partners, you can see the tangible evidence and growth of that. And I think some of the greatest work that we did was really under Olivia's leadership with the C3 work, right? If you look at the essence of the C3 work, the catalytic community cohort work, we invested up to $100,000 in emerging leaders, having them coached by high-performing leaders to tackle something they want to tackle. They get to pick their own team and have this experience of, I picked these groups of folks, they didn't deliver it. It teaches you a valuable lesson, right? And you have to know in your community who you can trust. Now, the issue is, when people have these experiences, they kind of sit on the experience and don't confront the organization, and then the organization walks away. If I pulled the wagon and you were supposed to help, and we get to the top and we get an award, and you standing there next to me, I'm looking at you kind of side-eye because you didn't help pull the wagon. But I'm not going to say that in public. I'm not going to say you don't deserve to stand next to me. But at some level, I have to go back to the organization and say, you failed to deliver your end. My team had to do double time to pull out across the finish line. I don't think you're a good partner for us. Now, if you want to get some help, we can help you, but we need a higher level of functionality from our partners. And I think, Terry, it's very difficult because here's the other dynamic. And I'll say this. I'm in a lot of meetings where I think at the upper echelons of the institution, they get what we're doing. And they go, we want to work with you. And I always cringe because I'm saying, I know that cognitively you get what we're doing, but does that distill down to your team's ability to act on what you want them to do?
Which is kind of what I am thinking, you know, because where I work is, you know, you've told me, when that kind of lack of accountability is in your own team, like that is what I'm thinking of. I mean, it's not, because you know where I work, but like, right? Like when you can't get that started. So anyway, that was just, I will stop now.
That's a good question, but I think that's why EOS is helpful in Rob saying what he said about being courageous and being transparent and saying, I didn't get mine done and it's on me, but knowing that the partner didn't deliver, I can't make excuses for that because then I give my team the excuse that, well, my partner didn't deliver. Well, it's still on you. And so now, do I need to rewrite my rock so that that doesn't happen? Do I need to hold my partner accountable, or do I need to come back and say the scalability of what we're working on is going to be altered because we can't get the right partner? And that's a conversation, honestly, I don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Right? Like once I put something in motion in my mind, I want it to happen. And the most hardest thing for me sometimes is for my team to come back and say, Fred, what you want's not possible. And in my mind, I'm like, everything's possible. Everything is possible. We just got to work harder. We got to think smarter. We got to get somebody else at the table. And I know some days they be sick of me. I'm quite sure they'd be like, this dude is not listening to us. Like but what I'm also saying is dare to be great. Like at best we've trained people to be good. And people's like, well, it's good enough. No, dare to be great. People's lives are in the balance and we're being good. Like, look, we're being good. What does being great look like? And if we dare to be great, what is possible? And this doesn't mean working 90 hours a week. It means, can I make the connections with people to get my work done more effectively and efficiently? And what does it take to make this bond tight? Because if I start off realizing I can't solve this thing by myself, am I a component of it? Am I the thought leader of it? Am I the trigger of it? Like, I need to understand, like, what is my role? And how do I position the team to function with them not seeing me as in a power dynamic situation because I'm bringing something to the table? So how do I recede to the background and be like, I'm just supporting this, or we're going to fund this, or we're going to look at funding it. Like, I need to see some traction. And so once again, I would say Olivia's work to me best exemplifies that. And I'm not sure where her total partners are. We targeted 50 communities in Allegheny County that we thought were the most at risk. And Olivia, please chime in because I don't know the data right now. I think we got like 181 partners and 40 some communities touched. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's pretty close. I think depending on a couple more projects, we should be at 210 total partners by middle of April, end of April, and close to probably 75 communities.
So that's an example of it going over, right? Taking one thought process of, because our philosophy is we're not making grants, we're investing in organizations and people. So that's a whole different construct. So I don't want you coming to us saying, can I have? It's about how can I become the best version of me in this role? How can you support that with your resources, thought process, platform? And what is the accountability in doing so, right? That's a different way of being in this work. Because ultimately, for this whole body of folks on here, if we don't intentionally create sustainable ecosystems, all of our work runs the risk of having 1,065-day impact, 3 years, right? Then we got to do something else because funders are thinking about something else, or the market gets saturated and we didn't pay enough attention to being great. We was just okay at it, and people figured out how to be better. And so how do we really look at those explorations in a much deeper way that transforms our organization?
Thank you so much, Fred. And I have one other question, and I know John sent this to you as well. But there was a good point that you made a couple questions ago around shared language and success through like talking points, right? Like we're creating these talking points for folks that you're speaking with, or people that you're in meetings with that seem to understand what we're doing. But when bringing that to the partnership level or the community level, there's also some shared language that needs to be created. So if you have a chance to answer, please answer that very quickly, or place that in the chat.
I think for us, we look at the global aspect of the world. And so using the social determinants of health gives us a local application to the work. Reverse engineering it to the SDGs, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, gives us a way to talk to partners around our work, both locally and globally. That conversation shifts the way we do work in such a way that it invites people into having deeper and richer conversations with us that go beyond the traditional framework. And so one of the things that's important about this work is it's not stagnant. It's just, this is the framework. As you work with other people, it grows as a result of the working with other people. It took us years for people to start even thinking about the work we're doing and seeing it as applicable. But what's critical for me was in 2018, when the city of Pittsburgh went to New York to work with the ambassadors there to adopt the UN SDGs, it was a collaborative effort. And that collaborative effort created a new framework for our work that had a global impact. And that global impact allowed us to have different conversations around the world about work we were doing in Pittsburgh and its value and impact on the sector.
Thank you so much, Fred. And Bree, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and launching the poll to make sure that we're getting feedback from folks who are joining the call this morning. Fred, I really appreciate, one, the connection with Rob, so the both of you could offer your perspectives on the EOS model. But two, speaking, at a personal level, an organizational level, and a sector or even ecosystem-wide level, is really helpful for contextualizing those pieces this morning. I'm going to be sharing my screen in just a second, and I know we are 3 minutes away, so I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. First and foremost, as far as public policy updates this morning, we have a public policy committee meeting this Thursday from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And that's going to be a follow-up to, what was really discussed. I mean, October of 2022 is, again, the collective capacity building and mobilization of the nonprofit sector in context of the most pressing policy issues for the entire region. So we do meet the third Thursday of each month. I shared last month that we're moving from the kind of shared education discussion-based meetings into more of the mobilizing, especially given that this is an election year. So if you can register, the bit.ly link is on the page. We can also place it in the chat. I look forward to seeing some folks, from 1 to 2 on Thursday of this week. Second update, there was recently introduced at the state level a 12 bill package on housing in the House of Representatives. So there's a growing consensus in Harrisburg that not only with education, but also with housing, there's going to take statewide and representative-led action in order to see some changes in housing shortages and rising costs of living. So this was seen in early 2023 in Governor Shapiro's proposed budget, dedicating $80 million to housing. We know that, per the actual budget that was proposed and a little bit, behind schedule, and then the subsequent code bills, that looks a little bit different, but the conversation is still not only being had, but being prioritized in Harrisburg. So as of last week, March 13th, a group of House members unveiled a package of 12 bills to help individuals afford and obtain housing within Pennsylvania. It focuses mostly on affordability through tax breaks, grants, and incentives for both homeowners and builders, as well as reassuring and updating building codes and regulations. So relooking kind of from the bottom up at not only the state policy level to change some of those things, but individual dwelling level. Bill sponsors note that over the last 4 years, a lack of supply, increasing costs for both rentals and home purchases, and changes, rapid changes to the economy, plainly, are making it difficult for Pennsylvanians to find and maintain their ownership or rent of appropriate housing. According to some estimates, that Pennsylvania is short 98,000 units, and the median new home sale price in Pennsylvania was $560,152, which is $130,000 more than the national average. So facing these disparities in ability to support new homeowners or hopeful homeowners, decreasing wages in line with inflation, as well as the increasing cost of homeownership. This is a huge barrier for a lot of folks, which I'm sure I don't have to tell folks on this call. The update is really that there's this ongoing conversation and 12 bills to support changes in how housing is supported and obtained in Pennsylvania. At the national level, I'm sure you've been following the conversations with the Supreme Court, looking back, the battle between free speech and disinformation, really centering on the White House strategy for censoring or removing certain content across platforms like Facebook, X, Instagram, Meta. So President Biden's administration has encouraged platforms to remove posts that federal officials deem misinformation, including about elections and COVID-19. There are some Republican-led states, along with 5 individual social media users, who are suing the administration, arguing that it violates the Constitution's First Amendment free speech rights when posts are removed from those platforms. I know a couple years ago, there were some asterisks on Instagram for a little while that said, this post might be misinformation or disinformation, as kind of a caveat, but removing the posts or censoring the information is really the topic of concern here. So in February, the justices heard arguments on other social media cases to uphold laws passed in Texas and Florida restricting content. And the ruling, this is an ongoing conversation. This is just the most recent phase. There is a ruling expected by June of this year. So again, especially in an election year where a lot of the League of Women Voters resources are talking about not only understanding what candidates stand for, but also understanding what can be trusted as true information, is really critical. And it's really part of a larger discussion about how cyber policy, social media policy, all of these are really behind the speed at which technology is changing. And so, just some things to keep in mind as it comes to the conversation on broader AI and technology and how those are adopted, that there's a lag time historically and currently around policies reflecting privacy protections or misinformation and disinformation regulation against First Amendment rights. So more to come on that really until June. And then finally, as a national level update, President Biden has committed to issue an executive order today expanding U.S. government research on women's health while spending $200 million in the next year to better understand issues including sexual and reproductive conditions. He's also ordering his administration to report on progress that they're making to erase gender gaps in research, to study how the use of artificial intelligence can improve women's health, according to administration documents summarizing the order. Some quick statistics kind of necessitating this push in the eyes of the Biden administration. Women globally live 5 years longer than men on average, but then spend 25% more of their lives in poor health. They often remain underrepresented in clinical trials, and conditions affecting women are researched less than those that impact men. Another area of underrepresentation historically is in terms of drafting and enacting policies governing health and healthcare decisions. And Biden has asked Congress for $12 billion in new funding for women's health research. But this is also recognizing that commitments over the course of the next year are difficult to come by, especially given how divided the legislature is, and during 2024 as an election year. So this $200 million investment, even if it's announced today, is really going to be taking place in 2025 fiscal year, which starts this year, October 2024. So that really summarizes the updates public policy wise. I am sending out some final information on AI cohorts today. We'll be launching our second round, kind of a ladder approach to the cohorts in May of this year. So if you have any questions or interested in learning more, please reach out to me, Emily@ForbesFunds.org. And I have some flyers to share as well. And then the 20th, which is Wednesday of this week, we are closing the application process for the Chief Project Management Officer and Project Coordinator at the Forbes Funds. And the salaries are posted. Interested candidates can apply at jobs@forbesfunds.org by close of business March 20th. If you have any questions, please reach out to info@forbesfunds.org, and we'll try to get a timely response for you. Thank you so much for everyone who responded to the quick poll, who joined us this morning, and I look forward to seeing you next week. We will actually be joined by Jamie Ducar, who I see is on the call this morning. Hi, Jamie, from Pitt, to learn more about the CEC and have a discourse with her and Justin from that team. So it'll be a really great conversation. Thank you, Olivia, for making that connection and continuing to support the recruitment of wonderful speakers for these calls for community solutions. I hope you all have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you soon.